I clicked the wrong thing.
How dare you?
Today's story is The Little Brawl at Ellen, an Irish fairy tale.
I thought it's like 2.5 Men. Ellen. Would have been funny.
I think, said Carol Whiteskin, that although judgment was given against Fionn, it was Fionn had the rights of it. He had 1,100 killed, said Conan amiably, and you may call that the rights of it if you like. All the same, Carol began argumentatively, and it was you that commenced it, Conan continued. Ho, ho, Carol cried. Why, you are as much to blame as I am. No, said Conan, for you hit me first. And if we had not been separated, the other growled. Separated, said Conan with a grin that made his beard poke all around his face. Yes, separated. If they had not come between us, I still think. Don't think out loud, dear heart, for you and I are at peace by law. That is true, said Carol, and a man must stick by a judgment. Come with me, my dear, and let us see how the youngsters are shaping in the school. One of them has rather a way with him as a swordsman. No youngster is any good with a sword, Conan replied. You are right there. It takes a good white man for that weapon. Boys are good enough with slings, Confo continued. But except for eating their fill and running away from a fight, you can't count on boys. The two bulky men turned towards the school of the Fianna. It happened that Fionn MacEwell had summoned the gentlemen of the Fianna and their wives to a banquet. Everybody came, for a banquet given by Fionn was not a thing to be missed. There was Golmore MacMorna and his people, Fionn's son Oisin and his grandson Oscar. There was Dermot of the gay face, Kelter MacRonan, but indeed there were too many to be told of, for all the pillars of war and battle torches of the Gael were there. The banquet began. Fionn sat in the chief captain's seat in the middle of the fort, and facing him in the place of honour, he placed the mirthful Gol MacMorna, and from these, ranging on either side, the noble of the Fianna took each the place that fitted his degree and patrimony. After good eating, good conversation, and after good conversation sleep, that is the order of a banquet. So when each person had been served with food to the limit of desire, the butlers carried in shining and jewelled drinking horns, each having its tide of smooth, heady liquor. Then the young heroes grew merry and audacious, the ladies became gentle and kind, and the poets became wonders of knowledge and prophecy. Every eye beamed in that assembly, and on Fionn every eye was turned continually in the hope of a glance from the great mild hero. Gol spoke to him across the table enthusiastically. There is nothing wanting to this banquet, O chief, said he. And Fionn smiled back into that eye which seemed a well of tenderness and friendship. Nothing is wanting, he replied, but a well-shaped poem. A choir stood up then, holding in one hand a length of coarse iron links, and in the other a chain of delicate antique silver. He shook the iron chain so that the servants and followers of the household should be silent, and he shook the silver one so that the nobles and poets should hearken also. Fergus, called True Lips, the poet of the Fianna Fin, then sang of Fionn and his ancestors and their deeds. When he had finished, Fionn and Oisin and Oscar and McLugach of the Terrible Hand gave him rare and costly presents, so that every person wondered at their munificence, and even the poet, accustomed to the liberality of kings and princes, was astonished at his gifts. Fergus then turned to the other side of Golmacmorna, and he sang of the forts, the destructions, the raids, and the wooings of Clanmorna, and as the poems succeeded each other, Gol grew more and more jovial and contented. When the songs were finished, Gol turned in his seat. "Where's my runner?" he cried. He had a woman runner, a marvel for swiftness and trust. She stepped forward. "I am here, warrior captain." "Have you collected my tribute from Denmark?" "It is here." And with help she led beside him the load of 3 men of doubly refined gold. Out of this treasure, and from the treasure of rings and bracelets and torques that were with him, Golmacmorna paid Fergus for his songs, and much as Fionn had given, Gol gave twice as much. But as the banquet proceeded, Gol gave, whether it was to harpers or prophets or jugglers, more than anyone else gave, so that Fionn became displeased. And as the banquet proceeded, he grew stern and silent. The wonderful gift-giving of Gol continued, and an uneasiness and embarrassment began to creep through the great banqueting hall. Gentlemen looked at each other questioningly, and then spoke again on indifferent matters, but only with half of their minds. The singers, the harpers, and jugglers submitted to that constraint, so that every person felt awkward, and no one knew what should be done or what would happen. And from that double dullness came, with silence following on its heels. There is nothing more terrible than silence. Shame grows in that blank, or anger gathers there, and we must choose which of these is to be our master. That choice lay before Fionn, who never knew shame. "Gol," said he, "how long have you been taking tribute from the people of Lochlann?" "A long time now," said Gol, and he looked into an eye that was stern and unfriendly. "I thought that my rent was the only one those people had to pay," Fionn continued. "Your memory is at fault," said Gol. "Let it be so," said Fionn. "How did your tribute arise?" "Long ago, Fionn, in the days when your father forced war on me." "Ah," said Fionn, "when he raided the High King against me and banished me from Ireland." "Continue," said Fionn, and he held Gol's eye under the great beetle of his brow. "I went into Britain," said Gol, "and your father followed me there. I went into White Lochlann, Norway, and took it. Your father banished me thence also." "I know it," said Fionn. "I went into the land of the Saxons, and your father chased me out of that land. And then, in Lochlann, at the battle of Knocker, your father and I met at last, foot to foot, eye to eye, and there, Fionn. And there, Gol, and there I killed your father." Fionn sat rigid and unmoving, his face stony and terrible as the face of a monument carved on the side of a cliff. "Tell all your tale," said he. "At that battle I beat the Lochlanners. I penetrated to the hold of the Danish king, and I took out of his dungeon the men who had lain there for a year and were awaiting their death. I liberated 15 prisoners, and one of them was Fionn." "It is true," said Fionn. Gol's anger fled at the word. "Do not be jealous of me, dear heart, for if I had twice the tribute I would give it to you and to Ireland." But at the word jealous the chief's anger revived. "It is an impertinence," he cried, "to boast at this table that you killed my father." "By my hand," Gol replied, "if Fionn were to treat me as his father did, I would treat Fionn the way I treated Fionn's father." Fionn closed his eyes and beat away the anger that was rising within him. He smiled grimly. "If I were so minded, I would not let that last word go with you, Gol, for I have here 100 men for every man of yours." Gol laughed aloud. "So had your father," he said. Fionn's brother, Carol Whiteskin, broke into the conversation with a harsh laugh. "How many of Fionn's household has the wonderful Gol put down?" he cried. But Gol's brother, bald Conan the Swearer, turned a savage eye on Carol. "By my weapons," said he, "there were never less than 101 men with Gol, and the least of them could have put you down easily enough." "Ah," cried Carol, "and are you one of the 101, old Scaldhead?" "One indeed, my thick-witted, thin-livered Carol, and I undertake to prove on your hide that what my brother said was true and what your brother said was false." "You undertake that?" crowed Carol, and on the word he loosed a furious buffet at Conan, which Conan returned with a fist so big that every part of Carol's face was hit with the one blow. The two then fell into grips and went lurching and punching about the great hall. Two of Oscar's sons could not bear to see their uncle being worsted, and they leapt at Conan, and two of Gol's sons rushed at them. Then Oscar himself leapt up, and with a hammer in either hand he went battering into the melee. "I thank the gods," said Conan, "for the chance of killing yourself, Oscar." These two encountered then, and Oscar knocked a groan of distress out of Conan. He looked appealingly at his brother Ardok MacMorna, and that powerful champion flew to his aid and wounded Oscar. Oisin, Oscar's father, could not abide that. He dashed in and quelled Ardok. Then rough Herr MacMorna wounded Oisin, and was himself tumbled by MacLogach, who was again wounded by Garak MacMorna. The banqueting hall was in tumult. In every part of it men were giving and taking blows. Here two champions with their arms round each other's neck were stamping round and round in a slow set dance. Here were two crouching against each other, looking for a soft place to hit. Yonder big-shouldered person lifted another man in his arms and threw him at a small group that charged him. In a retired corner a gentleman stood in a thoughtful attitude while he tried to pull out a tooth that had been knocked loose. "You can't fight," he mumbled, "with a loose shoe or a loose tooth." "Hurry up with that tooth," the man in front of him grumbled, "for I want to knock out another one." Pressed against the wall was a bevy of ladies, some of whom were screaming and some laughing, and all of whom were calling on the men to go back to their seats. Only two people remained seated in the hall. Gol sat twisted round, watching the progress of the brawl critically, and Fionn, sitting opposite, watched Gol. Just then Phelan, another Fionn's son, stormed the hall with 300 of the Fianna, and by this force all Gol's people were put out of doors where the fight continued. Gol looked then calmly on Fionn. "Your people are using their weapons," said he. "Are they?" Fionn inquired as calmly and as though addressing the air. "In the matter of weapons," said Gol, and the hard-fighting pillar of battle turned to where his arms hung on the wall behind him. He took his solid, well-balanced sword in his fist, over his left arm his ample bossy shield, and with another side look at Fionn, he left the hall and charged irresistibly into the fray. Fionn then arose. He took his accoutrements from the wall also and strode out. Then he raised a triumphant Fenian shout and went into the combat. That was no place for a sick person to be. It was not the corner which a slender-fingered woman would choose to do up her hair, nor was it a spot an ancient man would select to think quietly in, for the tumult of sword on sword, of axe on shield, the war of the contending parties, the crying of wounded men, and the screaming of frightened women destroyed peace. And over all was the rallying cry of Goll MacMorna and the great shout of Fionn. Then Fergus Tulips gathered about him all the poets of the Fianna, and they surrounded the combatants. They began to chant and intone long, heavy rhymes and incantations, until the rhythmic beating of their voices covered up the noise of war, so that the men stopped hacking and hewing, and let their weapons drop from their hands. These were picked up by the poets, and a reconciliation was effected between the two parties. But Fionn affirmed that he would make no peace with Clanmorna until the matter had been judged by the king. Cormac MacArt, and by his daughter Ailwe and his son Kerber of Analiv, and by Fintan the chief poet. Goll agreed that the affair should be submitted to that court, and a day was appointed, a fortnight from that date, to meet at Tower of the Kings for judgment. Then the hall was cleansed and the banquet recommenced. Of Fionn's people, 1,100 of men and women were dead, while of Goll's people 11 men and 50 women were dead. But it was through fight the women died, for not one of them had a wound or a bruise or a mark. At the end of a fortnight, Fionn and Goll and the chief men of the Fianna attended at Tower. The king, his son and daughter, with Flawey, Fihel and Fintan MacBogna, sat in the place of judgment, and Cormac called on the witnesses for evidence. Fionn stood up, but the moment he did so, Goll MacMorna arose also. "I object to Fionn giving evidence," said he. "Why so?" the king asked. "Because in any matter that concerned me, Fionn would turn a lie into truth and the truth into a lie." "I do not think that is so," said Fionn. "You see, he has already commenced it," cried Goll. "If you object to the testimony of the chief person present, in what way are we to obtain evidence?" the king demanded. "I," said Goll, "will trust to the evidence of Fergus Tulips. He is Fionn's poet and will tell no lie against his master. He is a poet and will tell no lie against anyone." "I agree to that," said Fionn. "I require, nevertheless," Goll continued, "that Fergus should swear before the court, by his gods, that he will do justice between us." Fergus was accordingly sworn and gave his evidence. He stated that Fionn's brother Carol struck Conan MacMorna, that Goll's two sons came to help Conan, that Oscar went to help Carol, and with that Fionn's people and the clan MacMorna rose at each other, and what had started as a brawl ended as a battle with 1,100 of Fionn's people and 61 of Goll's people dead. "I marvel," said the king in a discontented voice, "that considering the numbers against them, the losses of Clanmorna should be so small." Fionn blushed when he heard that. Fergus replied, Gol MacMorna covered his people with his shield. All that slaughter was done by him. The press was too great, Fionn grumbled. I could not get at him in time, or... Or what? Said Gol with a great laugh. Fionn shook his head sternly and said no more. What is your judgment? Cormac demanded of his fellow judges. Flowey pronounced first. I give damages to Clanmorna. Why? Said Cormac. Because they were attacked first. Cormac looked at him stubbornly. I do not agree with your judgment, he said. What is there faulty in it? Flowey asked. You have not considered, the king replied, that a soldier owes obedience to his captain, and that given the time and the place, Fionn was the captain and Gol was only a simple soldier. Flower considered the king's suggestion. That, he said, would hold good for the white striking of blows of fists, but not for the red striking or sword strokes. What is your judgment? The king asked Fehal. Fehal then pronounced, I hold that Clanmorna were attacked first and that they are to be free from payment of damages. And as regards Fionn, said Cormac, I hold that on account of his great losses Fionn is to be exempt from payment of damages, and that his losses are to be considered as damages. I agree in that judgment, said Fintan. The king and his son also agreed, and the decision was imparted to the Fianna. One must abide by a judgment, said Fionn. Do you abide by it? Gol demanded. I do, said Fionn. Gol and Fionn then kissed each other, and thus peace was made. For notwithstanding the endless bicker of these two heroes, they loved each other well. Yet, now that the years have gone by, I think the fault lay with Gol and not with Fionn, and that the judgment given did not consider everything. For at that table Gol should not have given greater gifts than his master and host did, and it was not right of Gol to take by force the position of greatest gift-giver of the Fianna, for there was never in the world one greater at giving gifts, or giving battle, or making poems than Fionn was. That side of the affair was not brought before the court, but perhaps it was suppressed out of delicacy for Fionn, for if Gol could be accused of ostentation, Fionn was open to the uglier charge of jealousy. It was nevertheless Gol's forward and impish temper which commenced the brawl, and the verdict of time must be to exonerate Fionn and to let blame go where it is merited. There is, however, this to be added and remembered, that whenever Fionn was in a tight corner, it was Gol that plucked him out of it, and later on, when time did his worst on them all, and the Fianna were sent to hell as unbelievers, it was Gol MacMorna who assaulted hell, with a chain in his great fist and 3 iron balls swinging from it, and it was he who attacked the hosts of great devils, and brought Fionn and the Fianna Finn out with him. The end. This was the Little Brawl at Ellen.